Oh great, another rotation cycle. Another so-called cultural exchange program forced on us by the Galactic Education Council. They call it education. I call it controlled chaos. And once again, I, Professor Klaxnar, Senior Lecturer of Interstellar Diplomacy at the prestigious Galactic Academy of Zorblax, have been assigned something I did not request. A human. Yes, a human. The newest addition to our so-called prestigious halls, where we have trained 12 galactic presidents and 17 supreme commanders. And now, they send me this. Professor Klaxnar, Principal Wirtz AA announced as she stood in my doorway, this is Olivia Barnes, our exchange student from Earth. A small, fragile-looking creature stood behind her. Human. She smiled. That alone was already concerning. No spines. No energy glow. No shifting biological patterns like proper galactic species. Just soft skin, 2 eyes, and a strange cluster of facial features that barely made sense to me. And on top of her head, ridiculous strands of brown protein filaments. Hair, they called it. Primitive. Mundane color, I muttered under my breath. How absolutely thrilling, I said aloud, letting sarcasm leak through my voice sacs. I turned slightly toward the principal. Tell me, does this one even understand basic quantum reasoning? The last Earth specimen struggled with 4-dimensional logic. Before the principal could respond, the human spoke. Actually, Professor, she said calmly, I have dual majors in astrophysics and cultural anthropology back at Cambridge. Silence. I've also read all 7 volumes of your work on non-linear diplomatic progression during the 3rd Centurion conflict. That got my attention. Even I paused. Fascinating, I replied coldly. She can speak. The principal's antennae flicked slightly. She scored very high on her entrance examinations. I exhaled slowly through my dorsal vents. We will see, I said. Theory and practice are separated by vast distances of competence. The human, Olivia, shifted slightly as she stood there, waiting. Uncomfortable. Awkward. Perfectly out of place in a room designed for 17 species at once. I gestured toward the back of the lecture hall. Sit there. She moved carefully between the seats, trying not to collide with alien seating structures built for completely different body types. The other students watched her. Some curious. Some annoyed. Some openly hostile. The Tarazian hive cluster buzzed in synchronized disapproval. The Navari delegation shifted away as their crystal-like bodies reflected uneasy light patterns. Only one student, a Ventusian named Garblethorpe, gave a polite oscillation of welcome. Settle down, I commanded. The holographic system activated above us. Today, I announced, we begin the analysis of the Acadian Proxima diplomatic crisis. At once, the room shifted. Even before anything happened, tension rose. Old rivalries. Old memories. Old hatred that never fully died. And sitting quietly in the back was the human, writing something in a small paper notebook. Primitive. Old-fashioned. Pointless. I almost ignored her completely. Almost. But something about the way she observed everything didn't feel useless. It felt intentional. And I dismissed that thought immediately. A human could not possibly matter in a room like this. Not here. Not in galactic diplomacy. Not in history. At least, that is what I believed. At the time, today, I continued, we study the Acadian Proxima diplomatic crisis of stellar year 7623. At once, the atmosphere in the room tightened. The Acadian students straightened. The Proxima delegation shifted sharply. Even after all these cycles, that conflict still burned beneath the surface. Not fully healed. Just paused. And now we were reopening it. Perfect for learning. Dangerous in practice. I should have chosen a safer topic. But diplomacy is never safe. A sharp voice interrupted. Professor, said Jack Still, the Acadian representative. His sensory stalks lifted slightly. Will we address the recent accusations of Proxima mining in restricted territory? Before I could answer, another voice cut in immediately. Cold. Sharp. Angry. Those territories were never restricted. Laurie 9 of Proxima responded. Your records were fabricated after the fact. The room shifted. Tension spread like a virus. I raised my voice across all vocal chambers. Enough. This is exactly the problem. This is academic simulation, not emotional warfare. But I could already see it happening. Old hatred was waking up. Again. From the corner of my vision, I noticed the human. Still writing. Still observing. Still calm. Strange. Most students here were already preparing arguments. But she just watched. Like she was collecting data instead of reacting. I dismissed it. Again. Humans were primitive observers. Not participants. I continued. For your midterm assessment, you will form 8 delegations. You will negotiate a peaceful resolution to the Senior's Resource Allocation Treaty. Instant chaos. The room erupted. Protests. Arguments. Confusion across species. A gaseous Phobian released a burst of panic emission. The Medusan students tightened formation. The Acadians and Proximas immediately separated like opposing magnetic fields. Order. I commanded. The holographic map expanded above us. This is not optional. You will work with assigned roles, not personal loyalties. I paused. Then added the most important rule. You may not represent your own species. Silence. Then outrage. Immediate. Explosive. This is unacceptable. Jackstill snapped. My entire lineage was destroyed in the Taurus Major conflict. And my species still carries the memory of your invasion. Laurie 9 responded. The room was collapsing before it even began. And I understood something very clearly. This simulation was already too close to reality. But that was the point. Diplomacy is not comfort. It is control under pressure. I spoke again. This is exactly why you are here. Real diplomacy is not done with allies. It is done with enemies you refuse to understand. The assignments were uploaded. Digital panels lit across the room. Students moved reluctantly to their groups. Arguments continued as they scattered. And then, I noticed something unusual. The human. She was standing still, looking at her assignment panel. Confused. I narrowed my eyes. Problem, Earth student. She hesitated. I don't seem to have a group. That was odd. I checked the roster. 47 students. 8 delegations. 1 mismatch. Of course.
Convenient error.
I exhaled. You will act as an independent consultant. A few students laughed quietly. A human. Alone. In interspecies diplomacy. Absurd. I looked at her directly. Observe only. Do not interfere. You are not qualified to represent anything beyond your understanding. She nodded. Yes, Professor. Calm. Too calm. Again, I ignored it. Mistake number 1. Over the next cycles, I watched the exercise unfold. And slowly, it started to work. Reluctantly at first. Delegations began negotiating. Small compromises appeared. Arguments softened into structured debate. Even the Acadian and Proxima groups stopped shouting long enough to listen. Progress. Fragile. But real. And still, the human kept moving. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly approaching groups. Sitting at the edges. Taking notes. Asking questions no one wanted to answer. Most dismissed her. Some ignored her. Some tolerated her briefly. But she never stopped. And that persistence began to feel less like annoyance and more like pattern recognition. Still, I told myself it meant nothing. Until later that cycle. When everything began to change. By the 9th cycle, something unexpected was happening. The simulation was working. Not perfectly. Not peacefully. But better than I anticipated. Delegations that had refused to speak were now exchanging proposals. The Acadians and Proxima representatives had even reached a fragile agreement on shared patrol zones. It wasn't trust. But it was movement. And in diplomacy, movement is everything. For the first time, I allowed myself a small thought. Maybe this group wasn't a total failure. Then everything broke. It started with every communication device in the room lighting up at once. A sharp, synchronized alert echoed through the lecture hall. Chimes. Warnings. Emergency signals overlapping into chaos. Students froze. Even I felt my secondary vocal sacs tighten. "Report," I ordered. A Ventusian student spoke first, voice trembling. "The Ardian fleet has opened fire on Proxima mining stations in the Sini sector." For half a second, no one moved. Then reality snapped. The room exploded into panic. Acadian students surged forward. Proxima delegates responded instantly. Old roles dissolved. Simulation collapsed into identity. "This is your fault," one shouted. "You broke the ceasefire," another replied. Within seconds, the classroom was no longer a classroom. It was a battlefield of loyalties. Shouting turned into positioning. Positioning turned into formation. Formation turned into hostility. I tried to regain control. This is still an academic environment. I roared. But my authority was already fading. The students weren't listening to me anymore. They were listening to war. From the center of the chaos, I saw her. Olivia. The human. Standing completely still. Not panicking. Not shouting. Not moving toward any faction. Just watching. Observing. Analyzing. And for the first time, I didn't dismiss it. Something about her expression changed. Not fear. Not confusion. Something sharper. More focused. Like she had just received a puzzle she understood too well. Then she quietly stepped back. Away from the groups. Toward the edges of the room. I almost called her back. But another shock hit before I could. The Academy's emergency protocols activated. A deafening siren filled the hall. Metal barriers slammed down over exits. Lockdown initiated. "This facility is now under containment protocol," the automated system announced. "No movement permitted." That should have ended it. It didn't. Because now they were trapped. And trapped soldiers always become desperate. "This building is now neutral ground." Jack still shouted. "That makes it a strategic asset." Laurie 9 responded instantly. "Then it must be secured." And just like that, the classroom became a war zone. Desks were moved into barriers. Communication devices were repurposed. Energy dampeners activated. Even training tools were converted into defensive systems. I stepped back in shock. "This is madness," I muttered. But it was already too late. A student group seized the environmental controls. Another blocked access to food dispensers. A third began controlling lighting systems to blind opposing factions. And then, hostages. I saw it clearly. A Ventusian student dragged behind a barricade. A captured Nubian ally from the opposite side. Threats exchanged immediately. Demands issued. The situation escalated beyond control within minutes. And I realized something terrible. This was no longer a simulation. It had become real conflict inside a classroom. And I was in the middle of it. Then I felt it. A sudden pull. A gravitational manipulation field. I was lifted without warning. Dragged across the room. And dropped into what was once a neutral refreshment zone. Now fortified. Controlled. Occupied. Jack still stood above me. "All sides agree," he said coldly. "You will serve as mediator." I stared at him. "I am your instructor." Laurel 9's voice cut in immediately. "Then you are also a liability." A pause. Then she added, "Or an enemy." Silence. I had lost control completely. And somewhere in the chaos, I saw Olivia again. Moving. Carefully. Quietly. Through places no one was watching. And for the first time, no one was paying attention to the human. That, I would later realize, was the most dangerous mistake in the room. The classroom had fully collapsed into controlled chaos. What started as a simulation was now something else entirely. A real conflict. Contained only by walls that no longer meant safety. From my position in the makeshift neutral zone, I could see everything breaking apart. Factions had fully formed. Barriers had been reinforced. Systems were being hacked, overridden, and repurposed faster than the Academy security could respond. And yet, the most important figure in the room was not any of them. It was the human, Olivia Barnes. Still quiet, still unnoticed by most, moving in a way that didn't match the panic around her. Not running, not reacting, calculating. She slipped through maintenance access panels along the edge of the room. Small gaps, hidden routes, spaces designed for drones, not living bodies. But she used them like she had known them her whole life. I watched her emerge behind the Acadian barricade. No alarms triggered. No detection systems reacted. Impossible. She moved to a storage cabinet, opened it, removed something simple. Adhesive binding material. Tape. I stared at it. That was it. That was her plan. Useless primitive tool. She disappeared again. Back into the maintenance duct. 10 minutes later, she reappeared on the opposite side of the room. Now inside Proxima-controlled territory. This time she took something else. Light refraction prisms from an optic storage unit. Still nothing strategic. Still nothing meaningful. I almost dismissed it. Almost. But then it happened again. She moved. Repeatedly. Back and forth across enemy lines. Each time taking something different. Reflective sheets. Disassembled terminal components. Emergency fabric materials. Even personal items left unattended. And slowly, a pattern started forming. At first I resisted the idea. Because it made no sense. There was no direct confrontation. No obvious objective. No visible strategy. Just movement. Collection. Disruption. Then, the lights in the eastern quadrant suddenly went out. A complete blackout. Confusion spread instantly through one faction. They redirected attention immediately. Investigating. Repositioning. And that's when the second event triggered. A series of bright reflections appeared on the western wall. Flashes. Signals. Mimicked movement patterns. False detection. The Acadian faction reacted immediately. They shifted their entire defensive focus. Wrong direction. Completely misled. And in that gap, I saw her, Olivia, moving through the center of it all, straight toward the captured Ventusian student, Garblethorpe. My thoughts froze. Impossible. She was using distraction without technology. No weapons. No energy systems. Just light, timing, and misdirection. Before anyone could respond, she reached the hostage, whispered something to him, and then calmly guided him toward another hidden maintenance access point. "Stop her," someone shouted. But it was already too late. They were gone. I stood frozen. "She's created a diversion system," I whispered, using nothing but environmental manipulation. Another alarm hit moments later. A second captive, Nubian delegation member, was also missing. Extracted the same way.
No breach alarms.
No forced entry. No detectable tech interference. Just absence. The room erupted in confusion. How is this possible? Laurie 9 demanded. Our sensors show no infiltration events. That's when I finally understood. Or at least, began to. They are looking for technology, I said slowly. But she is not using technology. Jack still turned toward me. Then what is she using? I didn't answer immediately, because I didn't like the answer forming in my mind. Then I said it. Human methodology. Confusion spread across faces. Then Olivia's voice echoed through the room. Calm. Almost amused. You're overthinking it. Humans call it thinking outside the box. A pause. Then corrected herself. Actually, just thinking outside the box. The ceiling speakers crackled. She was inside the system now. Somehow. And she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The factions erupted again, but differently this time. Not just anger. Uncertainty. Because something had shifted. They were no longer dealing with opposing forces. They were dealing with something unpredictable. Something that didn't follow their logic. Something that didn't follow any logic they recognized. I found myself saying something I did not expect. She is not behaving like a soldier. Jack still replied instantly. Then what is she? I watched as another light in the room flickered. Another system failed. Another distraction triggered. And another movement went unseen. And I realized the answer. She is thinking like a problem solver. Not like a warrior. Not like a diplomat. But like something far more dangerous. Someone who does not play by the rules of the system at all. And for the first time since the crisis began, I stopped underestimating her. The situation inside the lecture hall had stopped being controllable. Not because of violence, but because of confusion. Every faction was reacting to something they could no longer predict. Lights changed without warning. Signals appeared and vanished. Movements were misread. Defenses activated in the wrong direction. And every time they tried to adapt, something else shifted. Then came the final breaking point. A sudden silence. All systems across the room synchronized into one state. Every screen. Every terminal. Every communication line. All of them switched on at once. And on every display was Olivia Barnes, the human, sitting cross-legged on top of the central lectern. Calm. Eating a nutrition bar like none of this mattered. That alone stunned the room. Every faction froze. Even I felt my secondary vocal sacs tighten. Because she was no longer hiding. No longer moving in shadows. She had taken control of the entire environment. "Welcome to Peace Talks," she said casually. Her voice echoed through the whole system. "Please, everyone, take a seat." No one moved. She sighed. "You can also stand there in panic if you want, but it's not very productive." Still no response. Then she gestured. Somehow, food appeared. Collected from different parts of the facility. Emergency rations. Stored supplies. Even personal snacks from faculty storage. "How?" someone muttered. Olivia shrugged. "Long story. Short version? You all were busy arguing. I was busy observing." The room remained silent. Not because they agreed, but because they were trying to understand what was happening. Jack still finally spoke. "Is this psychological warfare?" Olivia smiled slightly. "No. Just diplomacy." She tapped her notebook. "I've drafted a preliminary agreement." That got attention instantly. A document appeared across every terminal. Structured. Clean. Direct. No ceremonial language. No symbolic phrasing. Just clear terms. Resource sharing. Territorial oversight. Security protocols. Mutual guarantees. Simple. Efficient. Dangerously practical. Laurie 9 stepped forward. "This violates every formal diplomatic protocol." Olivia tilted her head. "Yeah. I noticed your protocols didn't stop a war starting 5 minutes ago." Silence. Then she added, "So I ignored them." I found myself stepping forward without thinking. "On what authority do you propose this?" She looked at me. For the first time, I felt like she was not seeing a professor, but a system that needed updating. "I don't need authority," she said. "I just needed everyone to see the consequences of their actions in real time." Then she held up her device. "I've been streaming everything since the lockdown started." The room froze again. Every threat. Every hostage situation. Every escalation. All broadcasted to civilian networks across 27 systems. A ripple of shock spread instantly. Jack still stepped back. "You broadcast a classified crisis." Olivia nodded. "Public accountability tends to change behavior." She scrolled through her screen. "Right now, both of your governments are watching this. And so are your civilians." A pause. Then she added quietly, "And they are not happy." That changed everything. The factions looked at each other differently now. Not as enemies, but as representatives being watched, judged, held accountable beyond this room. The aggression began to fade. Not instantly, but visibly. Slowly. Laurie 9's defensive systems powered down. Jack Still's sensory stalks lowered. Even the other delegates hesitated. Because the battlefield had changed. It was no longer physical. It was public. And they had just lost control of the narrative. Olivia stood up. Her voice softened slightly. You all have been fighting over minerals in a sector with thousands of identical systems. You built empires capable of interstellar travel. And still chose war over inconvenience. No one responded. She continued. Humans nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times over less. That's how we learned. A silence fell over the room. Not hostile. Not tense. Just heavy. Real. Then something unexpected happened. The factions began talking. Not shouting. Not accusing. Talking. Properly. Carefully. Like they were seeing each other for the first time without weapons in hand. Hours passed. I did not intervene. For the first time. I didn't need to. And slowly, a framework emerged. Not perfect, but stable. A path forward. When Academy security finally arrived days later, they did not find a crisis. They found a negotiation, a working agreement, and a human sitting quietly in the middle of it all, as if she had simply done something obvious. Later, during the formal review, I was asked to comment. My response surprised even me. I underestimated her. She did not use force. She used visibility. And understanding of systems we refused to question. Olivia was awarded the Zorblax Medal for Interstellar Understanding. First human in history. First non-council species ever. After the ceremony, I asked her one question. How did you know what to do? She smiled. A simple human expression. We already lived through this on Earth, she said. We just didn't have the luxury of ignoring it. And in that moment, I realized something that will likely stay with me for the rest of my cycles. We thought we were teaching her diplomacy, but she was reminding us what it actually was.